First, I want to welcome everyone to today's DM Connect webinar. My name is Tracy McFarland, and I will be your host for today's event. We are going to be discussing Dr. Layman's journey from adopting dental monitoring to where when he actually started to see an ROI. He's going to actually walk us through some of his workflows and his why and how he was able to actually get his team buy-in. So before we get started, I wanted to also give you a little bit of information about Dr. Layman. After graduating from the Citadel with his Bachelor's of Science in Biology, Dr. Layman served as a paratrooper with the Army's 82nd Airborne. While he was in dental school at the Medical University of South Carolina, he was elected and served 4 years as class president while earning his doctorate in dental medicine. While he was attending Vanderbilt University, he was part of the 5-person hospital-wide team to implement electronic medical records. Imagine that. So here he is again. He's on the cusp of another paradigm shift that he's part of. But he also recently completed his Master's of Business Administration at the Wharton School of Business, where he received the Ben Franklin Award as well. So we also have a couple of pieces of housekeeping right before we get started. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we will answer these questions at the end of the presentation. And then we are recording the webinar and we will be sharing it. So just know that if you have registered, you'll actually be able to gain a copy of the webinar. All right, Dr. Layman, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Tracy, thank you so much for that introduction. And it really is a pleasure to be able to share today, share some of the things I've learned in this process. I grew up in a little small town in Virginia, a little farm town. My father was the store manager for the co-op, the one that essentially provided all the feed and fertilizer and equipment to the farmers in that area, similar to like a Patterson or Banco in our industry. I had orthodontics, luckily as a child, 13, 14 years old, 4 body extractions, and we'd have to drive every 4 weeks to Richmond, Virginia, which is about a 45-minute drive, maybe a little bit longer, to the other side of Richmond to see our orthodontist. And that experience really kind of stuck with me. And the ability to learn from that, to learn from my parents having to rearrange their schedule, to learn from, me missing school, a lot of times missing a whole day of school sometimes because just of the distance and what was happening and the time of the appointment. I didn't know at that time I wanted to be an orthodontist. I didn't have any inkling of being an orthodontist. And now looking back on those experiences that I had as a teenager, I've been looking in my 18 years of practice for things that would only help patients, not necessarily have to go through that. I know maybe a lot of people on this webinar are in similar situations. They live in areas that are more diverse, more spread out. And there are some great opportunities here that we're going to talk about today when it comes to using dental monitoring to help solve, cure, address some of those patient pain points like I dealt with as a teenager. So today I'm going to talk about it in 3 different sections, that kind of split up as you can see right here. And we're going to work to really develop each of those to the best of our abilities in the next 45 to 50 minutes. So this is always the question, right? This is the question I asked myself before I signed up. First time I asked myself this question, the answer was, I'm not doing it. And that was about a little over maybe a year and change ago. That why would I do this? I'm coming out of COVID like everybody else. We had developed some pretty functional and pretty good telehealth techniques because, once again, trying to solve that opportunity to help patients have the best waiting room in the world, maybe their living room, maybe their office space, things like that, and not necessarily have to come to the office. And so I felt like we had solved that. And then I really started digging into it and realizing some of the things we're going to talk about today. So the big why, what we wanted to do, reduce patient office visits. They don't want to see me. As much as I love seeing my patients and as much as I enjoy most of them. We all have it, we know. As much as I enjoy that, the ability to let a patient know that I'm here when you need me and we're doing everything we can to try to not interfere with your life was pretty fantastic. Getting rid of some of the appointments that I felt like didn't have to be there. And of course, labor. We'll talk about that a little bit too. I'll take a little bit more of a deeper dive into that, looking at some of the labor components on this. The patient's point of view. How often have you had a patient come in and still ask, even today, am I going to have to see you every month? Especially adult patients. I practice in Clearwater, Florida, God's waiting room right now. So I have a large amount of adult patients, and they remember maybe having braces in the 80s or early 90s, and it was still maybe a 1-month appointment check. And no, we tell them that that doesn't need to be your point of view. We're able to drastically reduce the number of in-office visits. And we've been wanting to do that with NiTi wires, with self-ligating. Over the past 20 years, since I was in ortho residency, there's been a lot of things that have come out, a lot of products, a lot of solutions that have come out in the marketplace, which have extended those appointment times for us. But still, I believe there's some appointments that we can eliminate from the repertoire to help these patients. So let's talk about this. The patient, I'd like to take a moment and go over the patient perspective. This was my professor when I was at school, doing my business school. And if any of you have done the AAO Wharton combined program, remote program, Dr. Terovich is one of the presenters in there. And if you've taken his classes or gone through his virtual course, he's pretty fantastic. So I was very fortunate to have him for an entire semester and touch base with him. He is a expert in Toyota manufacturing systems and Kaizen theory and really eliminating waste from processes and from systems. And he focuses attention on healthcare, bringing those techniques and those models into the healthcare field. And so, of course, every day after class, I would just tackle him. I just try to grab him, try to get his attention. And finally, we were talking about appointment lengths, we were talking about variances, we were talking about all these kind of geeky operation things. And at one point, we talked about an average aligner check. I was like, I really want to get rid of it. I want to use telehealth. I had just done a paper earlier that semester with another class on the difference in telehealth and how it was coming across in 2015, Doctors on Demand, MD Live, all these different companies. And so he asked me, he goes, how long is that average aligner check that you keep talking about? I was like, is it 15 minutes, 20 minutes? Is it 30 minutes? How much time do you allot in the office for that? And I told him it was like 20 minutes. That's what we allot in the office. So, and we stay pretty much within that. He goes, no, that's not right. And I'm like, how's that not right? Like, hold on. Okay. I'm in your class. What you want? Okay, I get it. What you want me to do is you want me to go back, measure the process through. Okay, I did. So I went back and I looked at 30 consecutive patients and I said, all right, I measured it. It's 19.45 minutes from the time they come in the door till the time they leave. Felt really proud of myself. Wrong. I was like, how is that wrong? And he challenged me to go back and look at it again. And so the next step I did is I went and I talked to the patients. I was like, okay, I know I measured it. So from our point of view, I know exactly what's going on. What's going on from their point of view? Well, I talked to a bank teller, a patient of ours that was an aligner patient. And I said, let's talk about your appointment. And I said, tell me about your appointment. How long is your appointment? Well, she said, oh, I got to leave the bank and I got to get to your office. It usually takes me about 20 minutes. Then I usually come in, I get on my phone, I mess around, I check in, you guys come get me. And then I might see you for a few minutes. And then we talk about stuff, we talk about aligners, and then I leave. And so I'm usually in the office about 25 minutes. Now, this is self-reported, so pretty close to what I was actually measuring. And that was one person, so the average can be different. And then I got to go back to the bank. I have to, get in my car, go back, check things out. Usually I've been gone. So to the patient's mind, that appointment was about 65 minutes. And so that was a huge wake-up call. So when I went back and talked to Professor Terovich, he was like, yeah, that's what we're looking at in healthcare, is understanding how long the patient's experience is. And the doctor FaceTime was like 2 to 5 minutes. And of course, she made a note. And that's why I put this picture of Steve Carell in here from the office, because she, as soon as you get back, they're like, gosh, how long was your appointment? And so sometimes that's the question the employee is getting, or your patient is getting when they get back. And I did this example because it's pretty mild, but all of us can imagine adding this exact same employee now having to go to school, stand in the office, wait for their kid to get done with a class, come to the office. So you can see how the patient's time can become very, very valuable if we're able to solve that. The next piece I want to talk about is labor. And, I've heard and spoke with people about DMs. DM is going to, I'm going to have to fire people. No, you don't have to fire people. Nowadays, gosh, if any of you are overstaffed, congratulations. Most of people I speak to are looking for somebody or two somebodies for their office. And usually we follow these guidelines. We're always looking for experienced staff, or gosh, even not necessarily experienced staff, but just somebody whose verbs are right. That's one of our mantras, is that we hire for verbs and train for nouns. So if we can find somebody who has all the right verbs, we can teach them all the nouns within just a couple of weeks, maybe a month, really dig down and show them how to do it if we find the right person. And of course, our HR person that does all the hiring, feels like everything's fine, everything's good, but is it really? So that's something we consider. Now, finding people and in this marketplace is challenging, not only because of recent events, but because of some macroeconomic cycles in the past. So give me just a minute or two. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but as I was putting this together, and the next slide we look at, I thought this might be a nice way to see some of what's happening in our marketplace, because we all see that after World War II, about 18, 19 years later, after World War II, we saw baby boomers start to enter the workforce. It obviously grew from there because there were so many children from that time, and that came all at once. And females entering the workforce in the 80s was a pretty big shift in the ability to have people in the marketplace that are going to help provide those services and provide that production. Of course, 50 years later, 45, 50 years later, we're going to start seeing those baby boomers leave the workforce and retire. But when you have retirees, you have a point where you need more people entering the workforce to help deal with the people that are leaving the workforce, because now instead of producers, they are pure consumers at that point, and consumers need people to service that. Just an aside, China's dealing with that right now with their one-child policy. They've got 4 grandparents for 1 grandkid, and that's a similar setup, much different than what we're seeing. We can see COVID, there was a massive drop-off just because of the ability for people to not participate because we couldn't. So it was a short blip in the history of time. And COVID is starting to come back up, but we're nowhere near the ability for, we're nowhere near the number of people that we had prior to COVID, which is why we're feeling a crunch. Also, with inflation going up and full unemployment, like I said, there's a lot more consumers out there that have money to spend, and we don't have as many people to actually service that demand. So that's what you're seeing on this Yahoo Finance graph, is that the yellow are the job openings that we have in the US, and the green are the actual hires. And so that's changing slightly as more people come back to the workforce, but anybody receiving unemployment is actually part of that labor force participation rate, because they ideally, and that's not a political discussion, but to be qualified ideally for unemployment, you have to actually show that you're looking for a job so that you are participating in the market in some way. And with unemployment only at 2.6% in Florida, 3.45% across the state, across the country, those people are actually counted in those numbers because they're actually if they are collecting unemployment, if they are living off of some sort of government subsidy, then they are included in those numbers. So people just they're just not entering the workforce. So how are we going to, thank you for that little aside. It sets up this piece where how can we bridge the gap between the number of job openings in the country, the number of hires that are actually happening because of the number of people available, and our population is only going to increase over time, whereas our labor force may not increase very dramatically. So, we're starting to see with ChatGPT, we're starting to see in all the industries, AI becoming that bridge that can actually help us between the jobs that are needed to produce for the consumers that are out there and the actual people that are available to work. Essentially, you can think about any of those like sci-fi movies. It's, AI can be an exoskeleton for your employees. Essentially you have one human intelligence can actually create much more production, create much more impact if they have the help of an AI. And dental monitoring kind of does that for us in the industry. So All that being said, we're not necessarily trying to actively reduce the number of people that work in our office. But with dental monitoring, what I found is I don't necessarily have to go out and find that person as quickly as maybe I did before, because I don't have that bottleneck that the lack of labor creates. Next section we're going to talk about is effective workflow. So that last section was essentially the why. Why do I use DM? Why do I like dental monitoring? And those factors really hit the core of what I want to be able to provide as great service to our patients with maybe less people, finding that bridge to do it, and the ability to really take care of our patients and ourselves. Of course, it does help to have, a little bit lighter workflow in the office. If you were seeing 100 patients, now you're seeing 60. You can maybe reduce your days, or if you don't want to reduce your days, just spend more time with the people when they're in the office. Because we might spend $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 in marketing every month, but you may find that sitting down and spending a little more time talking to your existing patients and maybe scripting a little better with some help or on your own, the ability to have them refer friends and family, your marketing budget may reduce because you're already filled with consults because of the way people perceive your office. So just a couple other little pieces about why. So what we're going to cover in the next little bit is effective workflow. Effective workflows are a little bit challenging to share. It's one of those things for me. I've spent a lot of time over the past couple months, really, because we just started 7 or 8 months ago. I want to go back and really recreate all the steps that I can effectively remember, and all the steps in a way that we can reflect back on and see what worked and what didn't. And being able to do that is important, and it's for a particular office. So as I talk about effective workflows, I'm a little more of a 20,000 foot view of how we did it. They get too much into the weeds. I kind of was challenged with this a little bit, because if I get too much into the weeds, then I feel like some of those particular items may not work for your culture. So if I stay a little bit higher level, you can insert what maybe some of the items in your office at that higher level, how you would drill that down to some of your team members, the size of your team, the size of your impact. I'm a single doctor, single location. I had multiple locations. I ended up selling them to some young doctors that I wanted to see move into a practice ownership dynamic. And so my workflow is going to be slightly different in the details than maybe somebody who has 65 offices or 12 offices or 2 or 3. And so that's the piece I want to keep in mind when I go over this. What I ended up looking at was, how can we talk about a workflow at a 20,000 foot view, but yet still maybe share a few details that we did that I think would help. And I wanted to equate it to something else. I wanted to try to draw a parallel between two things. And something I have experience with that is a 3-phased approach is airborne school. I went to airborne school in June of 1992. I was 19 years old and invincible at the time. I later learned differently. Now that I have a 19-year-old, I remember those days. And I want to equate these 3 phases of jump school: ground week, tower week, and jump week, to what we look at in what I feel like was a beneficial thing we learned going through the DM implementation, which was, what do we do prior to the ISP visit? What do we have to have ready? And what do we want to get from the actual on-site training with the ISP? And then what are our responsibilities? What are things that we learned after the ISP came in that we can share with everybody here today? So the first part is prior to the ISP visit. So going back to the other side, ground week. Ground week at airborne school is a lot of physical training, getting up at 4:30 in the morning, running God knows how far at Fort Benning, Georgia. And it's really just getting you used to the concept of what airborne is, what it looks like, what the flow feels like, what jumping off. We jump off a lot of picnic tables, just to feel ourselves hitting the ground. We do a lot of drills, reactive drills, like jumpers hit it, things like that, things that you need to have a muscle memory on, and you do it ad nauseum, because when you get to that final week of jump week, you want to have that feeling. You want to have that muscle memory that if something does go wrong, you have to be able to respond without even thinking about it. It needs to be perfect. So going back to the dental monitoring implementation, we looked at, in our office, we believe strongly in change management protocols. So when I want to change something, and this is from years of just coming back from a meeting or doing the whole, hey, I got an idea, let's do this. And it kind of diffuses into the practice and maybe not doing it as well or as methodical as it could have been, and learning from that after the fact. A big education prior to the ISP visit. And I think it's really important before they come in to really understand the scope of use in your office. So initiating change management protocols. So we have a person in our office who is really our systems expert. Natalia is terrific at, just extremely talented at, when we look at a process, when we look at putting something new inside the office, she can, in lightning speed, see the steps, find the right person, and help us implement that. So that she has been an absolute joy over the past couple of years when we were having to cope with COVID, having to cope with these rapid changes inside of our office. But the goal as the business owner, as the doctor business owner, wherever you are in your organization that's going to be implementing this change, is what's your vision? Going back to that first part, why are we doing this? Why do we want to go through the 6-month experiment of implementing dental monitoring into our office? If this person, now if it's you that does the change, it's very well. If it's another person, somebody should know exactly why. And you want to be able to convey that vision to that person. If you outsource, if you have a consultant, if you have somebody that comes in your office and helps you with this, the number one thing they need to know, I believe, is your vision. What is DM going to do for the practice? Why are you investing in this technology? Because all technology in our marketplace is an investment, and we should look at it that way. And it can really help us determine what output we want from that investment. And, if we go to the bank and we put money in a CD, we know upfront what percentage we plan on getting at 6, 12, however many months you do it. Same thing. If we're going to invest in dental monitoring, we're going to have a clear understanding, clear as we can have in an environment like this, what that is going to look like in the future and what that's going to provide for our practice or for ourselves. And then you want to decide on the scope of use. Do you want to add braces up front? Do you want to add aligners up front? Do you want to do all of your patients? Do you want to only add new patients? So that's something that you can decide. You can contact any of us. You can contact me. There's plenty of opportunities in the DM space to talk to other doctors about how they implement it, what they implement it, and get a really good idea on what you want to do there. Because knowing that up front prior to the visit is going to help your team, right now, your systems change manager and yourself get an understanding of the scope and the breadth of the systems that we're creating. For me, for our office, we onboarded both braces and aligner patients. One, just like the commercial, kind of a no-brainer for us. If Charles Barkley's on the playground, you're probably going to pick him. Even though he's got a little love in the midsection, he's still going to be the best player out there. And yeah, trust me, we all got a little love at a certain age right there in the midsection. But we onboarded both because those first 6 months that we talked about, that time where everybody's leaning in, everybody's learning something new, everybody is in your offices, whether they like it or not, they're going to be involved in this process. And I equate it to taking out wisdom teeth. Patients always ask, should I do the right side and then do the left? I'm like, it depends on your case, but really, if it was me, I'd want one night of thinking about it, one morning of, oh my gosh, it's today, one afternoon of Netflix and swelling, a couple of days of annoyance instead of doing that twice. And so that's why I liked it for this, because we knew we were going to be leaning in. We knew we were going to be talking about all these different items, and to go ahead and learn both of them at the same time when you're in that space of learning is why for us, we felt like it was a kind of a no-brainer for us to do both when we started implementing DM. So second meeting. And so now some people don't like meetings a lot. I don't love meetings, but meeting of the minds, understanding exactly what's expected at certain points, I believe is important. So the second meeting is with the change manager. We've conveyed our vision. We've given them some time to look into DM. We've given them some time to understand and put together their format of implementing something new into practice. And then we let them know, okay, so we are going to do braces and aligners when we start. These are the patients that we're going to add as we go through. And so that way that person can really start to understand maybe some of the information they need to gather, some of the patient information they need to gather, maybe some of the lists they need to start managing to put together how we're going to effectively do this. Then once the systems expert manager and the business owner or myself in the situation are on board, and we really feel like we have a clear understanding of the vision of implementing it, then we want to develop a mechanism. And at that point, we really need to start bringing in our admin, because our management structures, we have an administrative coordinator and we have a clinical coordinator. We want to bring them in and start getting their feedback. We operate under a Scrum methodology. It's a great book. If you haven't read it, it really helps. It's mostly for the software industry, but it really helps with project management and really breaking it down and putting together the type of user stories and the type of experience that we want to craft in the office when we make a change. So once we've had that meeting, now we've got our coordinators know where we're going. We've got our systems manager who's already starting to map out that's kind of a storyboard of how we're going to do this. And then the team. We want to just bring to the team, what are we doing here? I feel like I have a duty as the business owner, as the leader of the organization, to let them know we're not just doing this just because. There's a clear reason why I'm going to ask you to spend a little more time thinking about this, why you're going to have to change some of your protocols that we already use that probably work pretty well. But we see that the investment in this change is going to produce something that is better for the marketplace and potentially is much better for us based on how we're wanting to practice and wanting to treat our patients. Team buy-in, that's pretty, and the best way I found to get team buy-in is there's going to be somebody who's excited. There's going to be somebody who is like, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. That I kind of like that. Everybody I've spoken to, there's always somebody, and they'll let you, you can reach out to DM and you can have an employee start kind of playing with it. That's just the way I learn. I need to kind of just give it to me, let me mess around with it, and then train me on it. And that's kind of how we do our clinical training. Like we put them in situations, not with patients, but we create situations to where maybe they fumble a little bit, maybe they kind of mess her up a little bit, maybe they, or, oh, maybe I don't know what I'm doing. Because in our mind, we're like, oh, no, we do this, we do that. But when you're actually doing it, you find some things. It's kind of like see one, do one, teach one. If you see it, you're like, I got it. Then you do it, you're like, okay. But then when you try to teach it to somebody, maybe I didn't know it as well as I thought I did. And so this creates an environment so that when we have the ISPs come in, our office is really ready to take advantage and to maximize that time that they're going to use with it, they're going to spend with us. The right DMC. I put this in here because, you can do this really at any time in the process, but since there's going to be somebody who needs to be in charge of the dental monitoring platform. And what I mean by in charge of is, I like to see that somebody is responsible. That the word that I really don't care for is co-chair. When there's a co-chair, people start, like, well, what about them? What about them? It just creates an opportunity. Even if any of you, and I'm sure possibly a lot of you, have been in a situation when you've been the co-chair of something, sometimes you probably felt like the chair and the other person got the title, or maybe you were busy and you leaned on somebody. So it doesn't always have to be bad, but I like the fact that in the office, one person is responsible for items that we're looking at, not to assign blame necessarily, but so that there's a source, there's one single source where somebody has that information, even though cross-training is great. And we do have that cross-train, but there still should be that one person responsible. And that person, I feel, should be clinically driven. They should love really engaging with people. They love a challenge. All of those have been really great for Dina, who has done a great job. And I know when I gave a talk in March, she said something about me leaving the slide up a little too long. So I'm going to leave this up for just a few more moments. So. She's great. She's been a fantastic change in our office, and she's been an amazing DMC. Training with ISP. Training with ISP. So today's the day. You know, you've had a choice up to this point. You can either one, just wait when they come in, I'll learn everything I need to learn. Or two, we can be prepared because they're coming for a set amount of time. And we can use that time to have the ISP teach your team all about DM, or God forbid, your team hasn't even heard about dental monitoring at all, and they come in, which I don't feel like is the best practice, and that can probably set you up for failure, unfortunately. And they're going to help you understand all the terms, they're going to help you understand the platform. They're there to fill in the blanks and to give their expertise. So I equate this training with the ISP to this second week of airborne school, Tower Week. Tower Week is when you really start having to produce for yourself with a very sheltered environment. What I mean by that is jump week, you're on the ground. Ground week, you're on the ground, you're doing small things, you're learning muscle memory. Tower Week, you're in the 34-foot tower, which is what you see right here. They tell us that science shows that if you can jump from something 34 feet in the air, then you can jump from something 10,000 feet in the air and trust your equipment. So I don't know if they just made that up or whatever, but that was the piece that they told us. So you do this a number of times and you have to have successful exits and things like that. So there's more to Tower Week than this, but this is kind of the classic piece where you're actually learning how to exit and trust your equipment to get you safely to the ground. It's not my office, but I thought it was an amazing picture to put in. If anybody's on this webinar that's in this office, your team looks amazing. So when they come in, you're going to learn things about sandboxes. You're going to learn about goals. You're going to learn about timeframes. You're going to learn about protocols. You can see the definitions there. I'm not going to read them to you. For me, the goals are awesome because the goals are where we find wire passivity. The goals are where we find reached class 1. The goals are where we find spaces are closed. The goals are what allow us to do dynamic scheduling. Not part of the webinar today. You'll learn about that more in some of the advanced webinars, but the goals allow us to let DM help us see when that patient's exactly ready to be seen in the office for an in-office appointment. Time frames are like backstops to me. I'm able to put something in there, and if I haven't seen the patient in X weeks, we get an alert. Hey, you haven't seen them yet. Cool. Protocols can be made for many different things. We're going to show you a little bit about each of those and the actual screen that they use. And a lot of these things are what the trainers come in to do, what the ISPs come in to do, is they come in to help, to augment what you're already kind of learning and to show you best practices. Best practices are, they are inside the room and can see all of the things that are going on. They can see all the posters on the wall. And at the beginning, I was kind of looking through a keyhole. And so I really couldn't, I could see a little bit. I could look online, I could talk to somebody, but I could only see a little bit. But that person that's inside the room where it happened, they can see all of it. So I can ask little questions. Hey, I can't see to the right. Can you tell me you're over there? Like, oh yeah. There's like 20 people over here and they got this going on. You're like, cool, thanks. And so for me, that's when that ISP comes in. But if I haven't even looked through the keyhole, if I haven't even formulated questions when they come in, I feel like I've kind of wasted that. I feel like I've lost an opportunity to really gain information at that point. Notifications, patient tab. I love this because as you can see, they show us how to sort. They show us how to set the protocol so that we can sort effectively treatment types. So protocols help us put these patients in certain buckets so that we can then look at them. These are the protocols. And once again, they're going to help you set this up. You don't have to, this can be a little overwhelming when you first see it, which is why you don't have to do it on your own. And because DM has such a engaged workforce, I could say that if you call them and say, hey, I need a protocol for this, one, they're going to set it up for you. Or two, they're going to say, hey, that's great. Have you thought about this? Not to necessarily question you, but to help you see that, maybe somebody has tried that. Have you considered this? Just to help with feedback and once again, best practices for those types of protocols. Once again, looking at protocols here, how you set them up. They're going to teach you how to do all this. They're going to show you how to do all this. My goal of these slides is to show you some of the main things that you want to really lean on that ISP for when they come in, because a lot of this can be a little daunting to do on your own. And so prior to the ISP, educate, learn, find your piece, find the ones that you want to, the scope of use, things of that nature. And when they come in, you're ready to do a little more deeper dive. And the actual use of the scan box, the actual training of the patient, the actual, well, customer management, the actual, flow of it, the app, things like that. They're the ones that can really take that time to show you and spend a lot more time helping you help the patient on board with this platform. And can't stress it enough, if they come in and they have 8 hours and they spend 4 of it explaining to your staff the definition of dental monitoring, you lose a lot of that really great time you could have with them in this clinical environment. All right, we've gone through what we like to do before they come in. We talked just now a little bit more about like what they can help us while they're there. Now, what happens after that? Well, just like Jump Week at Airborne School, now it's on you. They've taught you how to do it. They've trained you how to do it. They've shown you everything that's going on. And now it's your turn to actually put your knees in the breeze. So parachute opens, that's always a good thing. And then, of course, that sack of potatoes hits the ground. You saw how fast they were coming in, and that's pretty accurate. You come in like a sack of potatoes, but I think the jump that scared me the most, I was 19, so I mean, nothing really scared me at that point, but the jump that actually did give me a little bit of hesitation was my 5th jump, because you have to execute 5 jumps in airborne and Jump Week to get your airborne wings. And they just keep telling you on your 5th jump, if you don't run off the drop zone where you land right there, then you won't graduate. You'll have to do it again. And I was, because if you bust your ankle, if you hurt yourself real bad, like, I wasn't necessarily at that point scared of getting hurt. I was scared of having to do it all over again. So that's the part that kind of got me. So once we have post ISP, we have some things to decide on with the whole team. So we're going to onboard. We're going to onboard existing patients, and we have some criteria on how we're going to do it. And so we asked the admin coordinator, how long is it going to take? What if we have this many patients to onboard, looking at the schedule, you're the expert on that, looking at the time that we have non-doctor days, looking at the patient population. And she said, give me 3 months and we should have everybody onboarded. And I like that, because it gives that person a lot more ownership over that deadline. If I just come in and say, in 1 month, everybody needs to be on it, okay, that might be completely unrealistic. So you do kind of want to understand what that should be, because if they say a year, maybe that's a little too long. But they come back 3 months, you're like, you know what? Let's go with that. And so I love the ownership on that by doing it this way. Also, how do we track that? Our PMS allows us to download all the patients into an Excel spreadsheet. And then, of course, our systems manager, amazing, was able to go through and create a sheet that the admin team could use when contacting patients and when deciding. When DM really starts to implement and really start to integrate with some of the practice management systems, this is a lot of these little spreadsheets we're making, and I'm going to show you over the next few slides, are probably going to go away, which is pretty exciting. And so this is something that we use, downloaded everybody, and then that middle circle, red circle that you see, we just, our systems manager, Talia, was able to create just a little drop-down box so that they could easily track who had already enrolled, who had called, who, you can see the contact, almost like if you have a collections piece, when they were contacted, how they were contacted, things like that. So having something like this and having it on like a Teams platform where multiple people can look at the exact same spreadsheet and update it simultaneously was a huge benefit for us in the adding of existing patients. And then we started talking about, where are we going to put them? Because, the admin coordinator said 3 months, but the clinical coordinator is like, what are we going to do? How are we going to do that? So I wanted Julie to have the ability to kind of contribute to that. She looked at the number of non-doctor days that we had coming forward, and some of the SOSs that we have scheduled, some of the meetings and training that we have scheduled. And she said, you know what, we can also, if the appointment's about 40 minutes or greater, a longer appointment, we more than likely could go ahead and onboard them there too. So once again, recruiting the person that's in charge of the clinic, in charge of the clinical flow, to actually make a decision and to have ownership of that decision, I felt was really important to do that. So our protocol for adding active patients, if they're less than half of treatment time is completed. So if I said it's an 18 months and they're only 4 months into treatment, add them to DM. If they still are class 2 or class 3 and they're still wearing elastics, let's put it on DM, because I want to really see if we have a compliance dependent piece in braces, then, or even aligners are always compliance dependent. But if we have a braces case that, if they're all unraveled and we're just settling it down and they're 12 or 14 months, I don't see the benefit there. But if they're, like I said, 4 of 18 or 20 months and they're still class 3 or class 2, then I wanted to be able to use DM, 1, to help monitor their compliance, and 2, learn from that case as they continue to go, because now every week I'm going to be able to see what's changing. And patient has a consent. So that's a pretty big piece. They do have to consent to this. And sometimes existing patients, because they know the difference, they're like, why do I have to start doing this now? Is it going to cost me more? No, it's not going to cost you more. So they have to consent to it. All new braces patients with plans greater than 6 months. If somebody wants to do braces, which is very rare, if it's a couple months, sometimes people are like, I don't trust myself to wear the aligners. Like, all right, I'll put a few brackets on. There's not really a compliance issue. I'm just unraveling a couple teeth. But all aligner patients. Now, every single aligner patient needs to be on DM in our office. Why? Why would you put every single patient on aligners? On DM? Even this little guy, maybe put an attachment, maybe not, maybe on the laterals so they don't squeeze or intrude on you. But this person's easy, right? Well, sometimes that's what it feels like on that 3 or 4 month case that you thought was easy. And then they tell you they wore their trays 25 hours a day. They come back, 8 trays later, 5, 6 trays later, and they still look like that. What do? What can you do? You can call them a liar. That doesn't work so well. You can put the tray in and show them it doesn't fit. They still don't like you. They still don't. You really don't have any data. That's the problem, is you have no information to truly have this conversation. And when I first started putting this together months ago, I told myself, I'm not going to add these to DM. I don't want the extra expense. I don't want that extra few bucks. I don't want that extra, whatever, $60, $70. I'm not going to pay that. Well, after you have a couple conversations with short, easy aligner cases, and you're like, this is fantastic. They're going to, because you got a short run, you got somebody who's going to be motivated for 5 or 6 weeks to do the DM. They're going to have an actual feedback. It's not fitting real well. You need to wear it 3 more days. And they come back and they're done. And so let's say you have an appointment, you have a patient that's 2 appointments. If you have a patient that's 2 appointments and you charge whatever you charge, divide that by 2, and then apply your practice overhead, that's your profit per visit. Now divide it by 3. It's a no-brainer. For me, it's very important to have that data-driven effect, especially on these short cases, because the difference between a 2 appointment case and a 3 appointment case can be dramatic in your office. So that's why, for me, I went ahead and said I'm adding every single patient, no matter how small, to DM. After a couple months, we realized that DM and our PMS, we use Greyfinch now, didn't really, we needed something to bridge the gap, because we were going back and forth. The DMC was looking at the chart, then looking at the cases. We had some of this dynamic scheduling, wire passivity, and class 1s. And so, the difference between who are they scheduling, who are they not scheduling, admin, it got a little messy. So we ended up creating a sheet that we had seen it in another course. Actually, the first time I saw this sheet, Bill Dissinger had presented it the Wednesday night before the summit. And I loved the idea. We took some of their information and made some slight changes, and the ability to have a lot of this information populate in very easily. And then I go and look at it's on here. I go look at it. I write what the next appointment's going to be. Let's say a 16 nye tie on that 3rd row down. If a 16 nye tie is passive and both arch wires are passive, what are we going to do next? Well, let's go up to the next arch wire. Do I need to be there for that? Maybe, maybe not. So depends on your state, depends on your practice philosophy, but you're just changing a wire and you've already prescribed what they're going to change. So that was really big. And then on the same sheet, a tab over, the DMC says, okay, good. I'm going to go in here. We're going to let the admin team know go ahead and schedule this appointment for this next appointment, a wire change. And, then the admin team can actually do a quick drop down box on how that's going. And so this system is evolving. And once again, Natalia was a huge implement in setting this up for us. And this system is evolving, and it's evolving well. And so we're looking extremely forward to the time when the practice management systems in the US can find a way and find that bridge to really start showing information, maybe on one platform between DM, maybe DM is inside the PMS, or there's a bridge there somehow, but that's going to be really exciting when we can remove some of these extra pieces and just have it right there. ROI. So we talked a little bit, I've made a few comments about, do I want to pay for this? Is this going to be good? That was one of my big things when I first started DM, was I turned it down because I just didn't like the fact that I'd have to pay this extra money. And I didn't really know what I was getting. And, after 18 years in practice, 19 years in practice, there's, I haven't bought many, but every now and then I get stuck with a toy. It was a technology probably a little earlier in my career where I was like, oh, this is great. And I'd buy something. And I'm like, I didn't really think that through. I didn't really realize that maybe this isn't helping that much. Maybe it's a lateral move. Like, I went from, maybe back in the day, you went from an electrosurge that worked fine and you bought a laser. You're like, have I really done anything? I don't know. Maybe not the greatest example, but, you can see how there's that maybe lateral move. And so at first I was a little bit of fear, not fear of missing out, but fear of messing up. I guess full move, fear of messing up. And then I really went down and I needed a proof of concept. Like I said, I'm an MBA. I wanted to find out financially, can I show that this technology, I do like the technology. I do understand the technology, and I had kind of scared myself away from it. But typically what I do is when if I see something that just I keep thinking about, then I'm going to do a little deeper dive on it. And so that's what I did here. What I did was I said, okay, if I take 100 patients and I know what my lab overhead is, I know how much the scan box is going to be approximately. If I have the same number of months, because I had to leave something consistent, now there's a lot of data being presented and being gathered that show that the average months of treatment can actually be reduced. That also is here, but not included in this model. What is your average selling price of an aligner case? And the only thing that I really changed was the average number of appointments requiring chair time. So that to me was a big piece. And I wanted to say, if I can reduce the number of in-office appointments, what is that going to do to my profit per chair time visit, per doctor visit? And just reducing it by 2, as you can see here, it was a pretty dramatic change in what actually happened there. Now, the question is, the revenue per visit, the profit per visit, the differentials down here in the green. And the real question that I had in this situation was, what am I going to do with that? What do I do with this number? Is this a real number? Are you really getting a difference in the profit per visit? Yes, but are you getting a difference in profit? Not really. You're still getting the same profit out of this because a lot of these expenses are fixed. Now there's going to be a slight variable cost because the tray you set up, sterilization, the mirrors you throw away, things like that, but that's very minimal when it comes to this. What you do pick up is time. So the difference in the profit per visit is one metric, but what that metric shows you is that you pick up a lot of time. And we're not going to talk about in this lecture. We got some stuff at the AAO next weekend where we deep dive into that a little bit more. But that's the piece. So if anybody is like me and looks at this and says, well, you get the same profit per case, right? The answer is yes. It's what are you buying and how much does that cost, or how much does that gain by doing this? So we'll talk about that more, but this was just a simple sheet that I put together. And once I looked at this and I played with it 100 different ways, and I called a DM back and I was like, all right, let's get this started. I definitely see a huge benefit in doing this. Never have I ever. I'm going to finish up with this. Never have I ever. I guess it's a game. that people play. And let's just play a little game real quick. Never have I ever let a patient leave the office with a wire that wasn't engaged. That's what I told myself. I said, you know what? When they said that, they're like, you're going to see, patients leave the office with wires not engaged. You're going to see this, you're going to see that. I'm like, there's no way. I see all of my patients. I see about 50, 60 patients a day. I check them before they leave. How could that happen? Okay, well, this is my picture. So this is from my DM platform. And yes, I did. And it blew my mind. And it happened. I wish I could say this is the only picture I found with an alert that a bracket wasn't engaged, but sometimes with self-ligating, things get rushed, things get hassled, parents are talking to you, and or you just miss it. I can blame all these external factors, but sometimes we just miss it. And that was a huge wake-up call. So understanding what we're doing that creates inefficiencies in our cases, understanding how to correct that. There's some great lectures out there, webinars out there on DM insights, and people talk about ways that they've used those DM insights to actually look a little deeper into some of their clinical practices to, at first, may felt like a little bit more appointments to fix these items, but the learning curve was much steeper to be able to effectively change these instead of letting things like this that just simmer under the surface continue to happen. So today, we talked about why we do DM. We talked about kind of a 20,000-foot view of effective workflows and the way that we implemented DM in our practice, and equated it to jump school, airborne school, and in a three-phased approach: pre-ISP, post-ISP. Training with ISP and post-ISP. Sorry, a little PTSD from airborne school when I thought about it, and my voice got weird. And an ROI. Is there an ROI? Yes. We did a very cursory touch on that ROI. But yes, I do believe that there's a very defendable ROI there. So thank you all so much for allowing me to share this information with you. And we love going into this and digging into this and having the opportunity to bring it to you. Thank you.
Dr. Layman, thank you. That was amazing. We greatly appreciate all of the pearls that you've given us today. So we do have a few questions, if that's okay with you.
Of course, yeah.
Okay. One of the questions was, can you give an example of how you use the goals feature that you referenced to?
Two ways that we use goals that are very palpable for me are we use Carrier distalizers, and the patients, you can essentially set a goal that when the patient achieves a class 1 occlusion, please contact me. DM, send us an alert when the patient achieves class 1. So that's a great goal, because now the patient is wearing their elastics, they're being monitored, we're spot checking because we're still, we're still a little more involved. But once those teeth hit that class 1, we're ready. Now they can come into the office and have the next appointment, removal and scan for aligners, or removal and place brackets. And so we are treating the patient just in time. The second one that we do is wire passivity for brackets. That, for me, the goals, we use them a lot, as you can tell, from more braces cases and for occlusion correction cases. Because when a wire is passive, what we're doing now is we're setting it for 14 weeks. And if we get an alert at 8 weeks that the wire is passive, at 9 weeks, at 10 weeks, then we know that the patient's ready to come in now, instead of arbitrarily guessing, come back in 12 weeks, your teeth should be straight. Well, the teeth may have been straight at 8 weeks, and you could put the next arch wire in. I go 14, 16, 16, 22 because I'm an 18 slot. So if I can go from 14 to 16, 4 weeks quicker, and not have them wait a month just sitting there doing nothing, we prefer that. So those are the two main ways we use goals in the DM platform.
Perfect. So I have two questions. One will play off of the other, but they're actually from two different doctors. So I'm going to do this one first. Did you get pushback from the active existing patients for introducing them to dental monitoring mid-treatment?
Okay.
And then I'll let you answer that one. And then I have one more.
Okay, so I'll answer that one. So yes, we did. Not very much, but we did. Because the conversations were, number one, oh, you don't want me to come in the office anymore. You're eliminating me. What if I need to see you? That was a bridge. That was a block that a lot of people kind of put up.
Right.
And two, and that's something that we can manage with either with conversation, but not too much conversation, because I don't want them to even take that away. I say, look, not look, gosh, that'd be horrible to start with. But I say, thank you so much for your question. And this is something that helps us monitor your case very closely. I'm here whenever you need me. I'm in the office. We realize that your time is very important. And this is something we thought that might be really good to help you come in right when you need to come in. And that's it. And if they're like, no, I'd rather come in, back away. I mean, I'd be like, okay, no, you know what? We don't have to do this. No problem. Let us know if you change your mind. Just, and then I call the referring dentist and let them know, because I don't want there to be a conversation that is remembered the wrong way. The second one that really shocked me was not really shocked me, but there's that, I think it's called the social dilemma or something like that on Netflix, where they talk about, even like the person that invented the like on Facebook, like doesn't let his kids on any social media or even phones because of all the, I guess, neurotransmitter issues. And so a mom actually came in and said, I really don't want the notifications because I don't want the dopamine release that my kids get when they get addicted to these types of things on the phone. And I was like, okay, that was a pretty good argument. I wasn't sure how to answer that one, but that is unusual because most people don't have that. But those were the two biggest ones that I've heard. And that was really only the dopamine thing was just one person, but I just thought it was so clear and specific that I'd bring it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And you almost wanted to ask her, but you like either leaving home, going to the office, or leaving home, going to school, coming to the office, going back to school, then going home. That's, it's crazy, but yeah.
That would be my ego talking, not common sense.
I know.
So yeah, I'm not going to do it. Not going to try to avoid that as much as I can.
Yeah. Yeah. So another portion that plays off of this, what are the most common positive? And then the second part is negative things that patients tell you about dental monitoring.
Active patients or any patient?
I would say the patients that are using dental monitoring.
Two positive things I hear are, one, they can actually see what their case is doing. So there's a lot of curiosity built into that because they actually can morph and on the app look at their case from where they were to where they are now.
Right.
So there's a little bit of like, that's kind of cool to be able to see their actual teeth changing to a better position. I've had people say that I've had parents say they like the notifications about hygiene for their child. And I've had adults say that they like the notifications as a nudge to say, you kind of missed this area back here. And they're like, oh, cool. And so that kind of double check on some of that, some patients really enjoy that.
Right.
That's positive. Negative. Yeah. I don't have time. It's kind of annoying. Do I have to do it? I haven't really heard anything negative about it. They just don't want to do it. And so maybe they have a negative piece. They just haven't shared it. They just default to, I just don't want to do it. And so maybe I'll ask more questions about that. I'll try to dig into that a little bit because I can't think of any actual negative things that have been said.
Right.
But most people just maybe I let them default to, I'm just not going to do it. And maybe ask a little bit more, like, was there something about it that got you, and maybe build that information better, because I know there's negative things. I'm not like, oh, DM has no negatives. I'm sure people have something to say. I haven't asked that second question after they say they don't want to do it. And that's something I want to do from now on. So that's a good question.
Right. And do you think they don't understand the benefits when they're telling you they don't want to do it? Do you think that that's just something they just make a decision? I just don't want to do this.
Possibly. if I go to a doctor and they tell me about this new thing that's going to, my parents have diabetes, and that if I do this, there's no way I'll get diabetes. Depends on the day. Maybe I pay attention. Maybe I don't. I'm not necessarily the greatest patient either. So I don't
Yeah.
know. That's a tough one.
I have two more questions for you. So with onboarding all new patients, braces and aligners from day one, how long was it before you could feel comfortable adjusting how patients were scheduled? And how did your team react to this change?
3 months. What we did was, at the beginning, we decided that we were not going to start doing dynamic scheduling until that active patient list was complete. Reason being is we wanted to have that piece of our practice accomplished, because we knew that admin and clinical, mostly admin, it was going to be a big shift for them. So to hit them with, here's a list of a few hundred patients you have to somehow schedule and add. And oh, by the way, at the same time, we're going to totally change the way you're scheduling people. We didn't think that was appropriate. So at the 3-month mark, when we onboarded everybody, we did hit that they did hit that benchmark. When we added that, we said, okay, now we're going to start doing a dive into dynamic scheduling. And so the way we did it was, we started with patients that were aligners and caries, something that we felt like if they get away from us, it's not going to be that big a deal. And we used those goals, but we did have an appointment pretty far out, like 14 weeks out for them. But when it was wire passivity, we'd go ahead and bring them in and cancel that other appointment. So those are some ways, and we're still in the middle of that. So we're not by any means fully integrated with that. So we're still because this is something that I want to be a complete tectonic shift in how we schedule patients for the next 15 years. And so we're definitely wading slowly into the baby pool on this and making sure that we're laying strong foundations along the way to really make this work well.
Okay. The second part to that question was, are you doing on-demand scheduling?
What do you mean by that?
So are you allowing patients to leave without a next appointment, but then when the AI tells you, hey, this patient is ready for the appointment, or however you have your protocols set up, then you call the patient to schedule the appointment?
So we're currently in the test phase of giving them an appointment further out and then calling them to come in earlier when their wire's passive.
Okay.
And we're having really good results with that. So in a month, I believe we're going to be able to start saying, we're just going to contact you. We want to make sure our systems are tight, because this can't be a net. This cannot be a net. It needs to be a Teflon sheet with no permeation at all. I mean, we can't let anybody slip through. And so we're building those systems slowly to make sure that we have just a Teflon sheet and not just a really good net to grab everybody.
Perfect.
So no, we haven't done it yet, but we are on the, in more of the advanced presentation, we're on the path of doing that. We have a workflow to create that.
Okay. So you're pretty much in the process for the most part.
We're building it now and making sure that our foundations are solid as we move towards that.
Awesome. We can't wait to hear you teach on that part too.
Thank you.
All right. That is all the time that we have today. So I want to thank each and every one of you guys for participating. If you have any more questions, or there was any gray matter left out there anywhere, you can reach out to Dr. Layman, or you can reach out to myself or anyone here at Dental Monitoring. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.